It is opposite seasons on the show. The Sydney winter has swapped places with the Alaskan summer. On this episode, we investigate why Google is paying Apple a crazy amount of money, how the future of mass transit is about to be revolutionized with the Hyperloop, and finally laugh at the Swedish deciphering dolphins. Yes, really. The Dane and the Pain, always made fresh from semi-natural ingredients.
And welcome to another episode of the Dane the Pain, the show that goes to the end of the internet for a picnic and holds hands when crossing the street. I am currently in Sydney, Joe, as I kind of hinted to at the last episode. And you just told me that we've got reversed weather because it's winter here, but it's like, I don't know, 18 degrees outside or something, and sunny and blue sky. And you've got winter.
Yeah, it's howling outside right now and rain and what have you, and it definitely feels like fall anyways in Alaska, Southeast Alaska. As I look out my window, I can see a lone light of a boat coming out of the fog out of Nichols Passage. So yeah, I wouldn't want to be out in the water tonight, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So isn't what the Alaskan summer is? How many hours?
Well, I mean, depending where you are in the state. So keep in mind, we're probably about 1,300 miles from the northernmost point of the state. And so, you know, we will, our longest day, of course, is in like whatever the 20th of June or 21st of June, whatever solstice is. And, there's probably, 3 or 4 hours of dark where it's actually dark. But as you go further north, of course, that becomes less and less, and you get into twilight. But the weather just right now is just like right out of October. It's flooding and rain and wind and all that kind of stuff.
Weird.
But it's good. We needed it. So.
Oh yeah. No, so I'm in Sydney, which is for the geographically challenged. It's about an hour flight north of Melbourne, or northeast-ish. And it's NDC time again, so it's NDC Sydney. I do like these conferences.
What is it? What does NDC stand for?
Well, it was Norwegian Developer Conference when they started 10 years ago in Oslo. And obviously now it's in London, and it's in Sydney. It's outside of another town in Norway. It's done one in Copenhagen. Like, they're all over the place, right?
Yeah.
So now I believe it's just NDC is what they never actually used the full, non-abbreviated term, but they now call it the New Developer Conference, I believe, if people ask. So it's a bit of history for you.
Can I ask you a question about this? So this just occurred to me. So these have been going on for 10 years.
Yeah, in Oslo.
And I think I've asked you some combination or something like this before, but since, 10 years ago, has it changed sort of the way that information is presented, or is it largely still the same? And that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I haven't been involved in the speaking geek circle thing for that long. I mean, my first NDC was 2015.
Oh, I see.
So I haven't been involved that long. Although I would say that just doing good-looking presentations in Keynote or PowerPoint or whatever your tool of choice is for these technical things has become easier. It's just more approachable. It's easier to do animations. It's also at the same account. It's also much, much easier to make it look really crap because, it's the good old thing of, how many animations should you use in your PowerPoint deck? It's either none or one, right? Yeah, I know. So there is that part of it, and I have my own particular style of slides that I'm quite happy with. It's changed a little bit over the last 4 or 5 years, but not a whole lot. I've certainly gotten better at making them look a bit more professional, possibly. But the way you deliver information has changed, I believe, just because of the way the internet works. So you used to buy a book and you used to learn from that. Now you hardly sell any books, and something like Pluralsight, which is online video training, is much more prevalent. You also get, tutorials that you follow along and then on websites and stuff like that. And that certainly wasn't something we had.
Well, it just struck me as it, so these conferences and these things tend to have a half-life. And, what's different, I'm just thinking what's different about this, that it's been able to grow, expand, and remain, at least from the outside looking in, vibrant and interesting. And maybe I'm getting a biased look at it through your eyes, but, why
you
is
will
that
be.
different than something else, right?
Yeah, so here's my theory on it. I think generally conferences that are product focused, so for big companies, whether they be Microsoft or Apple or Oracle or any of those sort of SharePoint, well that's Microsoft, Salesforce, whatever it might be, they make conferences to sell a product, and they want people to go there and learn about this product and then invest into to earn more money for the business. And that's kind of how a lot of company sponsored conferences work. And then you have another segment of it is, hey, here's some guys that are really passionate about technology. They're putting on a conference like we put on DDD Melbourne last Saturday for the 8th time. But we all amateurs essentially, right? So there are some conferences around the world that are incredibly well organized, but they're organized by 2 or 3 people, and they do it in their spare time, and they manage to do a really good job. But the half-life is probably directly related to how much energy they can spend on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have these conferences, which is like Richard Campbell's from .NET Rocks. He does a bunch of conferences in the US. The NDC guys here, they do now a bunch of conferences, and it's what they do. It's what the company does, right? So that's their professional skill is delivering events for developers. So they're not content experts. They don't own the content. They don't really care what the content is to a large extent because they want the best content they can get. And because of that, they can focus on actually making the conference happen and build up the brand and the event and how it works, because they don't have to focus on building an event that is for a particular aim in terms of selling a product. And I think that's probably an important sort of distinction, is that there are companies whose purpose is to create events, right? So they're not event management company. That's not what I mean. I mean, they're a company that has a series of events or conferences, which is part of how they make money. And because of that, it's the age old, well, either you expand and grow or you go backwards, right? And you die eventually. So these guys really have it nailed. The way that they do conferences, the human flavor, if you will, of them is so particular that people just keep coming back. Like, it's just a nice place to be. Everybody talk to everybody. There's no them and us in terms of speakers and attendees as much. It's just a really pleasant place to be. And I think because they've created that atmosphere, they've really managed to kind of capture what developers want, which is why we keep coming back.
Well, I think that's as someone who's attended conferences like professional conferences in my life, and largely they've stayed the same, and there's they use technology, and certainly that sort of changed the way things are organized a bit, but in essence they're the same, and I just sort of wonder if that's really the value in that, aside from face-to-face networking, which is, always, I think, preferable to, even over Skype or some other, sort of form like that. It's almost always better to see people face-to-face. So, but I didn't mean to steal your thunder there, Lars. I just was curious about that. Just sort of struck me how it had been around that long, because, like I said, most of these things, they go for a couple of years and then they're gone.
That's right.
Even the big ones through companies,
Yep. Well, look at someone like Microsoft that do a lot of conferences. They keep changing them up, right? So in Australia, it was TechEd for a long time, technical education. That then got rebranded to Ignite because they had to align with other company values and, other products and all that stuff. And they just evolve. So they keep producing conferences, but they keep changing them as well. So, just different takes on it, I guess. Now, I wanted to talk to you about, there's a few things that we've found here that I think our listeners might actually get a kick out of. So the first thing is something I kind of knew, but I actually didn't give much thought, because in the mobile space, to be honest, and I mean, I don't really want to admit this, but there are two players, right? There's Android and there's iOS, and those are your two choices essentially when it comes to mobile phones. So you would think that these guys are serious rivals, right? They're really battling, and they are different segments and whatnot. But apparently, I found this: Google is paying Apple about $3 billion a year, and they're paying them this money to stay as the default search engine on your iPhone. And I just this article kind of does a bit of analysis of it and say, well, it's actually as much as 5% of the profit for the iPhone comes from Google. 5%, because this is just money for jam. Like, there's nothing else that Apple needs to do. There's no investment from their side in terms of making this happen, right? So it's just free money essentially. Here you go. And I don't know. Are you aware of other agreements like this where, like, the water's a bit muddled?
Well, I mean, these things are going on all the time, and I mean, the most recent one that at least in my head was a Nokia, yeah, a Nokia, sorry, and had sued Apple a number of years ago for intellectual property rights, and there was a settlement just recently that I think Apple paid them several $100 million, $1 billion or something like that, and then agreed to pay them a certain amount that was not as much as $3 billion a year, but not a dissimilar figure either, a significant amount of money. So I think there's there's a myriad of reasons why, well, Google would want to be on iPhone, and Apple, probably to a lesser extent, still would want to have those products in their phone just because that's what a lot of people are used to. But I would say that Apple probably has certainly more leverage in that relationship with Google. I'd be curious if this applies to the phones that are sold in China too. And Microsoft did this also with Windows 10 in China, where they had their own version of, and then I think also in Russia of Edge that they were using, or Bing, one of those two. Maybe it was Bing. So these things exist.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is interesting is that's a lot of money. That's a lot of cheese for Google. I mean,
It is.
for Apple, that's a drop in the bucket. But it's actually a significant amount of free cash flow.
Yeah.
But if you think about what Google has to lose, I mean, 80% of their business is selling ads, and the people that have money and buy stuff are the ones who can afford to buy an iPhone. So they better well have a dam there to keep competition out
Mm-hmm.
on the search side. I've never used Google on an iPhone, and I don't know if it's easy to remove or choose a different search engine with
I'm not sure.
uninstall it.
I'm not sure. It's
I'm not sure if it's like bloatware where it's sort of stuck there and you just have to hide it, or
no, I
if
think
you
it's
don't want to
actually an
use it.
integral part of the OS. I'm sure you can probably change it because competition watchdogs and stuff would say that you have to. But it's there. I'm just reading a bit further in the article, and it says 50% of Google's mobile search revenue is actually from iPhone or from iOS. Like, so it's not something that they're
Yeah.
just gonna not do.
Yeah, I think these days, so it's interesting because people will always sort of put up the big five or whatever. You have Facebook and Amazon and
Mm-hmm.
Google and Apple, these big companies, and the reality is that they don't really, but they compete with each other around the edge, and when it comes to intellectual property and being able to own what is next, and sort of the messaging around what is next and who is the coolest, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. But really, as competitors, there's not a lot of direct competition. I mean, even with the cloud businesses, it's really not that close of a competition, and it's an ever expanding market. And the margins, one of the interesting things about that is that nobody really knows. They all explain their income differently when it comes to cloud
Oh yeah.
revenues. So it's like
Well,
it's like comparing apples
I
and
think I know why
oranges.
that though. Have you ever used one of these cloud calculators for how much something will cost to run?
I
It's
have not.
impossible. Like it's just a pure mystery how these things work because there's so many variables on uptime and load and data usage and blah blah blah. So they probably don't know themselves either.
Yeah, I've actually thought about our local government keeps all of its public records was it Amazon's
Hmm.
AWS, and I thought about, since that's public record, that I could go and find out what it costs for them to host. But obviously, I have a life, things
No,
I'd
yeah,
rather do.
it's just no interest.
But I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how much money Google made last year, but in net profit. But that is interesting that Apple's sort of got him over a barrel.
Yeah, kind of. Well, there's kind of like, at what point does Google not have to pay because Apple that it's so popular that people would do an uproar if it wasn't the default. And at the same time, Apple made their own Maps app, so why are they not making their own
Yeah.
search engine? Like, they're big enough now.
Well, then what about Siri? That's my thing. Is I was thinking, well, Google, you have Siri on iPhone. How does that integrate with Google? And how do they reconcile that? I I don't know. It is kind of interesting. But the companies, it's kind of like the China owning the U.S.'s national debt, or a big chunk of it. It's like you have mutual self-assured destruction if you're partnered
Hmm.
like this, and so they really have to the extent possible, work together to make for a seamless, experience for their user. My own thing about search is that I think search is, it's like Walmart. It's these ever decreasing margins, pressure
Hmm.
on margins, and you cannot. There's a finite number of users, right? So like Facebook, they say they've got 1.5 billion users. Well, hell, there's only 7 billion people on the planet. So you can look out and go, we know how big you can be. And when you get that big, I mean, I would hate to run that business, because I can't even imagine, how you would, the pressure to grow is so
Oh
so
yeah.
great. Yeah, anyways, we're off the subject,
No,
but
I just find it interesting that it's kind of like almost what's a good analogy? Say you had I always go back to cars, but if you had say Ford and GM, right, two of the biggest, let's say Toyota and GM, right, just to not have it all American. Um, um, if suddenly you started having and you do get this sometimes actually, you get engines from say a GM engine goes in a Toyota body, right? It's just
sure.
this we tend to look at things very black and white, or I do at least, and you go, oh, Google and Apple, well, they're competing. They're trying to have the best mobile platform, both of them, or the most popular one. But yet there's these agreements, right? That Google is so dependent on their competitor um, that yeah.
But Google doesn't compete with Apple. I mean, Google
Well,
sells
they do,
ads,
but they also have,
and search ads. They don't sell hardware. And Apple makes most of its money
uh-huh,
off of hardware. It's slowly getting into services, and
yep,
other revenue, reoccurring revenue. But that revenue to Apple is as other is to Google. Where Google has 4 to 5 $4 billion a year that it pours in a hole, trying to develop a new product, and
hmm,
that makes money, and it hasn't for
yeah,
5 years now. Um, but anyways, maybe I think Google's just sort of funding iTunes or something. I don't know, or Beats,
yeah,
or maybe Google is funding. Google basically is paid for the development of the iWatch or the Apple Watch or whatever they call it.
the eye patch.
Anyways,
Um,
I mean, it's also. I mean, what is it? Microsoft is. Has makes somewhere between $1 to $2 billion a year in recurring revenue from from licensing for different licensing for Android devices.
Oh
So
yeah,
this,
oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's all those sort of cross
yeah, they
deals
stand in
being
a
done for
circle and
sure.
hand the money to the right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It just goes in a circle. Anyways, sorry,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
wasn't very funny.
Um, interesting. Uh, all right, I'm moving on here now. Something really exciting happened about a month ago, and it's exciting
It was my
for a number of
birthday.
reasons.
Oh, okay,
No, not
damn
that.
it.
That wasn't exciting. Well, I still can't believe. So you turned 82 anyway. Um, the have you heard of the Hyperloop?
Yeah, yeah, I have, Lars, but like I told you, I know very little about it.
Yeah, so it's okay. I'll give you a quick introduction here. So I find this very fascinating. So I don't understand all the technology in it, and I won't pretend that I do. But the Hyperloop, it's a mode of passenger or freight transportation. I guess you could do either, and it's essentially a train inside a tube, right? That's the picture you need to have in your head, and it's driven by a vacuum and magnets. So this is another brainchild of Elon Musk and other very, very clever people from Tesla and SpaceX. So they're like a joint team. And they did up these concepts and I think they essentially wanted to give it away for free. So they wanted to revolutionize the mode of transport in the world. And this is one of the ways they want to do it. The other one is with the electric car and another one is with rockets. Um, so this is a a train that travels at, hold on to your hat here, about 600 miles an hour on average. So crazy fast. Like we're talking airliner fast, right?
Yeah, you better
And
not hit a bug, because pretty much
well,
everything,
it's inside a
yeah,
vacuum too, right?
anything you hit turns into a bullet, basically, even small things at that speed.
Yep. Yeah, well, this is true, and this is obviously one of the challenges. But the way that it works is that if you think of magnets, essentially it's kind of self-propelling. It uses very little energy because of the way that they kind of have designed the. Yeah, I'm not explaining this very well because I don't understand all of it. But it's very low energy and it's very fast. It's very low footprint because you can just place this on top of the ground, right? You don't need to dig in the ground or anything like that, and it's reasonably quick as well to set up. So the really exciting thing, because this was all just concept, is that Hyperloop, which is the company behind it, has set up a test track. So they've done like a 1 mile test track. And they've now had the first successful test ride. And they did,
With a person,
I can't remember how, yeah, there was people in the train and everything.
and they went 600 miles an hour.
Actually, no, they didn't go that fast. But they've proven that they can actually run it, right? So it's,
So my own brain's like, I'm thinking, is it cheaper than getting in a jet and going 600 miles in an hour?
oh yeah, oh yeah. As in, well, not right now because there's no infrastructure, but it doesn't use any fuel. It uses some electricity to create the vacuum. It doesn't. There's no emissions. You arrive and you get out. There's no boarding and landing and all that stuff. It's just like a train. So you'll have stations and all that stuff. But what is really exciting is that a country like Australia could benefit from this so much. Like you could travel from Melbourne to Sydney in about an hour, just like you do on a plane. But you don't have to go to the airport and then check in and then sit and wait and then get in and then sit. It would be like going on a train, and it would be much quicker overall. The overall
What's the
travel time.
problem they're trying to solve?
The problem is that mass transit essentially, because currently you can use planes, which are very expensive.
Yeah.
It's not cheap getting a plane ticket. They also pollute. They use an enormous amount of fuel, obviously. It's getting better with the new 787 and whatnot. They're getting better with the whole green angle, but they use a lot of fuel. and it's all fossil
So
fuels.
just because I'm silly and I think about these things, I'm just imagining being in a tube with some number of people in a
Hmm.
vacuum, and
Yep.
people have gas. How are they going to, how are they going to manage that kind of stuff in that sort of small space?
Well, I'm sure that it's ventilated, and well, just like a plane is, right? Plane's a tube as well, and you can't get out, and it's hermetically sealed
Well,
almost.
this is what I mean is if it's a vacuum, you can't, if you have any kind of hole into the, or any way of venting, it would have to be a one-way vent. And as soon as that opened, it would suck all the air out. So you'd have to have some way of
Um,
recirculating the air. Okay, and maybe I'm going down a
I'm
bunny
sure that's
hole. I'm
yeah. I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't know what they do. Um, but it's well, they're trying to eliminate air resistance and friction, right? Which is why it's so uses so little energy and can reach those speeds because it's a vacuum, right? There's no resistance or
Well,
no
yeah,
friction
it's
in
like
the
you go
actual
into,
tube.
it's like when you go to the drive-through, well, at least when I do at the bank, or I go to a credit union because I hate banks, but, um, and they send you a tube and it comes zipping out to you and drops down and you
Yep,
put it in there and it goes right back up, which to this day
yep,
I sort of laugh and giggle whenever I see that because it's cool.
yeah.
Sorry,
So
it's like that.
the real issue here is that you need to maintain the vacuum
Yeah.
over very, very, very large distances, and that I think that is the real problem, which is what they're trying to solve. And they have solved it now for a mile track, which is obviously not from LA to San Francisco, which is always the example they use, but it's part of the way, right? And if you look at the video, I'll put that in the show notes as well. If you look at the video, it's just so smooth and it's just so quick that I don't know how it would be to sit inside of it. Like you can't accelerate that fast, and people get whiplash.
You know where I thought this would be cool because I have no interest in getting in a tube and going, to Seattle in a tube like that. But I don't know why it just seems more dangerous in the ground than it does in the air, and that maybe that's just me, some intellectual
But it's a
block I
closed
have.
system, though.
Well, I understand that but there's no explaining. It just seems more dangerous. What would be cool though? Well, that would be cool, but I think what would be cooler is if you had a similar system except to go into space, an elevator.
Oh, space elevator.
Yes, to take you up into
Yeah,
suborbit, and then when Musk gets a stinking something that'll take us out of this galaxy or whatever, we can just get out of here in about, I don't know, what's that, 300 miles? What's it to the lower atmosphere?
I'm not sure.
It's a couple hundred miles maybe. Is it that far?
I don't think it's that far.
It's not that
But
far.
if you want to know more, dear listener, about space elevators in particular, the podcast.net Rocks has a great show on space elevators.
Really?
Like goes into a lot of detail around how could you even conceive building them, because you've got, so the idea is, really briefly, that you have some sort of tether or something that essentially just hangs from the air because gravity um, is pulling it down to make sure it's sitting at the ground, but it's far enough out in space with some sort of counterweight out there that it won't fall down, right? So it's this idea of using gravity and physics to have a self what do you call it? Like it's keeping itself up. Like it would look weird because it would just be like a rope going up in the air, right, and just disappearing.
God.
Um,
I just sort of had the idea, it'd be great because if you had garbage, you just throw the garbage in the space elevator and suck it right out into space, and we can pollute the rest of the system.
Is
Sorry.
that it? That's your ambition for technology? Jeez. I can't take you
I,
anywhere.
but I honestly, the idea sounds really cool. But where I think it might be even more interesting is as they engineer and work on this thing, they're going to come up with solutions for other problems
Oh yeah.
that
Oh
might
yeah.
actually be more pressing, at least in my own mind.
Hmm.
Because this seems like for mass transit, you need something that can carry, thousands of people routinely back and forth. In the amount of money that you'd have to invest in that, just seems like it would be Trumpian in order as far as the amount of money it would take. Not that it couldn't be done, But
Well, they're
anyway,
estimating that the LA to San Francisco route, which is kind of the one they always use an example. So
yeah.
that's how far is that? I'm not even sure how far that is. Maybe 400 miles, something like that. That would take about 35 minutes, and to build it would cost somewhere between $6 and $7.5 billion. I think if this does take off, and I have every believe that it will, once they start mass producing these tubes in like modular segments, the price of that's going to come down a lot. But yeah,
Sure.
it's infrastructure, and no Western countries have invested that much in infrastructure, I think, in a single new technology in a very long time.
Oh, we're gonna build a wall.
Oh, that's right. How's that going?
I just sorry. Oh,
Uh, so so Hyperloop is happening. They're doing tests. They've got it running in a 1 mile test track to about maybe 400 miles an hour or 200 miles an hour. I think it was 200 miles an hour. It was reasonably fast. And it's open sourced by Elon Musk and SpaceX, so other companies can take it and improve on it and build it, which is kind of cool. He's a open sourced engineer.
yeah, those bullet trains always scared me. So I mean, there's some of that is just my own like weirdness about going that fast on the ground, and I'm not driving. Now, if I'm driving, I'll
Yeah,
go as fast as it possibly can.
different
Anyways,
story altogether.
I love that.
Uh, but
What
yeah, so
else do we got to talk about? Anything else interesting going on?
well, you found this. this oh God, where do we even start? This, okay, I'll read the. I'll read
My
the
topic is
title of
better
this
than your
article.
topic.
Oh, it is. It is. Mine's useful and applicable. Yours is just much more interesting and ridiculous. So the article here is titled "The Language of Dolphins Could Be Translated by 2021." Swedish startup Gavagai AB, a language technology company, will be using its AI capabilities to decipher the language of dolphins. I'm not kidding you. Ah, okay.
So I mean, uh, I mean, it's actually very serious
I
what they're
know.
doing contextually with AI and language. And, so once you get past the silliness of it, it, it their system, as they state, has mastered 40 languages, but it focuses on textual analytics. And I think, which to me is much more interesting because and we kind of talked about this before, just generally, but it's not with people, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? Most of our
Yep.
communication
Yep.
is not the words I'm telling you right now, Lars. It is being able to see the person, see their face, the intonation, your relationship with them tells you much more about what they're feeling and thinking than
Absolutely.
what they actually say. And
Yep.
so this is really designed more to pull out that sort of information. And of course, it's a Swedish company, and they always come up with the coolest
They do. And
stuff.
I've now learned that there's something called a dolphinarium.
Oh,
That's where they got these bottlenose dolphins. It's a
but
dolphinarium.
so let's just say they start talking to the dolphins, and the dolphins, they don't like what the dolphins have to say,
I know. It's
right? I
like
mean, what if the dolphins are foul-mouthed? Really, what if they're bigots? What if they hate all the whales?
I reckon. Yeah, I'm not sure. I want to know. Like, what if Flipper is suddenly just this raving lunatic? Like, who could deal with that?
Maybe they're in a cabal with the seals or not. I don't know. Um, it's the other thing they said, the idea of preparing for the have well, they're thinking about using this as a way to prepare to communicate with alien life forms.
I know. Yeah, it just gets better. It's a story that keeps giving, right?
Well, yeah, because and actually that makes some sense because if um, so you can't assume that any other life form would have any semblance of communication like ours. So what you would need is something a system that could go and look at sort of basic elements and basically sort of rebuild whatever language or sound or visual that they may have to communicate. And and that's sort of what they're trying to do here with the dolphins. And what would you ask a dolphin if you could ask him a question?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd probably, try and get some jokes off him.
That's right. I would probably ask him, why do you jump out of the water?
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, why do they, what is the origin of that behavior? I guess there's a lot of different things like that where, why do they do that?
Yeah, or what
there's,
would you like to have thumbs?
yeah, exactly. And why do anyways, so you should go look them up. I don't know if they're on Twitter or whatever.
Oh,
It's Gavagai,
yeah, I don't know.
and you can pronounce it
They've
and
come
I
up with that
can't. But
name. I don't know. Who knows? It's
does
Swedish.
that mean anything to you? Are you don't or do you speak?
Oh God, what's
We
Swedish? Well, nothing in Swedish really
you,
makes sense.
I was
So,
gonna say you speak at least 30 languages, don't you?
absolutely.
God, they should just have you come and work with the dolphins.
This is true.
All right, so that was my topic. Hopefully, that people think it's as funny as I do.
It is, but it's kind of it's funny, but I can see what they're trying to do, right? It's just that, like, it's funny. Imagine being on that. So what do you do? So what's your job? Well, currently I am talking to dolphins.
Yeah. Well, it's an obvious one because as a mammal, a larger brain, and they already, I mean, the U.S. Navy, anyways, I know has done a ton of research using them for specific tasks, so they can be trained to respond to stimulus. So there's obviously something. There's already a body of work to build off of. Whereas if they were going for the Pacific halibut, I don't think they would have much luck with that.
No, I'm sure there's some animals that are less interesting than others to talk to.
I mean, it'd be fun to talk to like a chicken or something like that. What would they have to say? Maybe, maybe there'll be a day where it really is. You can, there was a movie called Up where the
Yes.
dog, the
Squirrel.
dog had the little translator, and you could see a day where that's, potentially something like that could actually exist
Yeah,
if
maybe.
you really
But
want,
a
if
lot
you
of
wanted.
animals it's not verbal communication. There's a lot of body language and a lot of, you know,
Well, what if it just translated for that for you? Right? So your dog's got its tail neutral and wagging back and forth, head up, tongue out. I'm happy. I'm happy. I'm happy. Right?
I don't need a translator to know that.
Yeah. And my cat would just basically be pissed off all the
Well,
time.
that's a cat's job. That's what they do.
Angry, angry, angry. Food, food, angry, food, angry.
Foot, let me eat that.
That's right. All right. What's next? We beat that to
Yeah,
death.
no,
Not the dolphin, because I would never do that to a
well,
dolphin.
it is actually that part of the show where it's time for the joke of the week.
It's the joke of the week, so come along with me. I cannot promise it will be funny, but it's the joke of the week.
And this time I've got a few. So, speaking of dolphins, why don't dolphins do well on school tests?
I don't know.
Because they work below sea level.
Oh, Jesus.
Why did the dolphin cross the road?
Oh, I don't know.
To get to the other tide.
I was going to say to find its purpose or porpoise. I'm sorry. I'm just really not funny, Lars.
They're funny. Well, these were excellent. That was
Well,
brilliant.
hey, good luck with I think you're doing a talk or something here tomorrow, a
I
break
am,
leg.
yeah. Yeah,
And
tomorrow morning I'm doing a talk, and then I'll do another one on Friday afternoon. I'm talking about Cosmo, so I'm going to have little Cosmo robot help me out. He's going to be on stage, rummaging around, playing with his blocks.
I wanted to just say, anybody listening, so Lars and I were talking before the show, and this is sort of my conundrum, is I have not seen a piece of hardware that I've either seen or played with or whatever that I have thought is sort of compelling in a number of years. And I'm just curious if I'm missing something out there, if somebody has something that they think is really cool that we need to bring up or talk about, please send Lars and I a note, share it with us on social media, email us, or on Facebook, wherever your poison, pick your poison, and let us know. Because to be honest, I've been looking for a while for something that just would make me go, oh wow, or gee whiz, and I haven't seen it.
I agree. No, I completely agree. What's the next thing that we should keep an eye out for? Put a comment on the Facebook page or tweet us, at Last Clint or at Alaskan Jackson. Or just add Dane the Pain as well. Either.
And if you need to, you can go to NDC in Sydney tomorrow, and you can heckle Lars in person.
Please do. There's great food.
Yes.
All right. On that note, I'm gonna go and have some food, I think.
All right, Lars. Take care. Until next time.
See ya.
Later.
Thank you for listening in on another episode of the Dane the Pain. We record across the Pacific, across hemispheres, and across time zones. You can find us on www.daneandthepain.com. Our Twitter handle is Dane_Pain, and we are the Dane and the Pain on YouTube and Facebook. We're also on your favorite podcast app, including iTunes, and please join our fan club by clicking the Register Now button on our website to know about upcoming shows and any free stuff we may have to share. See you next time on The Dane and the Pain.